Hey, what's up? See, that's how I know something changed. And I was just using this last night. What's up? I'm back again. I'm back again. I'm back again. I'm back again. I'm back for another Mental Health Thursdays. I've been switching up the names lately, and I'm thinking about switching this one too. Because we gotta grow something here. You feel what I'm saying? We gotta grow. It can't just be mental health without some sort of mental growth. By my opinion. Just trying to make sure I got all my levels right, got my screen right. Get my stream title in there correctly. It's not episode 9, it's episode 10 for the people who wondering. Wondering. If you're wondering, the word for the day is wondering. 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 Stop wondering. And we in the zone, y'all. So today's topic is what is mine? What is mine? Who out here playing? Alright, let's not waste time. So we're gonna get right into this thing. Oh, it's a commercial. Alright, ain't no they audience. Let me go collect my stuff. So we're gonna dive right into this. Let's see what this video has to say.
You have the mind of Christ. Let me say it again. You have the mind of Christ. 1 Corinthians 2, verse 16. We have the mind of Christ. 2 Timothy 1:7. The Lord has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. A sound mind. You have the mind of Christ. Ephesians 6:17, put on the helmet of salvation. Philippians 4:8-9. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. You have the mind of Christ. Don't believe the lies. Don't dwell on the past. Don't dwell on what you hear from the enemy inside your head. Cast that thing out. You have the mind of Christ. So don't give in to discouragement today. No way, not today. You have the mind of Christ. The enemy is coming to steal and to kill and to destroy, but not today. You have the mind of Christ. He who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. So you are on the winning side. The Lord is with you, mighty warrior. You are on the winning side. God has given you the mind of Christ. It's time to think God thoughts. It's time to think faith thoughts. It's time to think hope thoughts. It's time to think joy thoughts. It's time to think love thoughts. It's time to think patient thoughts. It's time to think good thoughts. It's time to think heaven thoughts. It's time to think Jesus thoughts. It's time to think God thoughts about who you are, who He's made you to be, what today is going to be, what you're going to do today, how capable you are because Christ is in you and He is the hope of glory. You are wildly capable. You are creative because He's made you in His image. You bear the image of Christ. You have the mind of Christ. It's time to win. It's time to go from struggle mode to victory mode. Yes, the struggle may be real, but victory in Christ is even more real. That's your reality. That's your truth. That's where you're going today. That's where you come from. That's His new mercies, brand new today. He speaks a better word. He is with you. He is for you. He is in you. He goes before you. He's your rear guard. He's all around you. He has angels placed all around you. He has angels assigned to you. He is mighty. He is a fortress. He is a refuge. Run to Him, walk with Him, be with Him, spend time with Him, make time for Him. Open the Bible, read the Bible, quote the Bible, shout the Bible, sing the Bible, scream the Bible. Let the Bible into your heart and let the Bible out of your mouth. Let it pour out today. Find a scripture, cling to it, cling to this one. I have the mind of Christ. Say it with me. I have the mind of Christ. I have not been given a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. I have the mind of Christ. I'm putting on the helmet of salvation. I have the mind of Christ. Holy Spirit, rise up in our hearts, encourage our faith, encourage our hope, encourage our joy. Lord, we pray that you would take discouragement far from us. Fling it out into the ocean far away from us. Lord, we pray that you would give us your eyes, your hope, that we would be able to see you, fix our eyes on you, fix our eyes on Jesus, the hope of glory, the risen one, the one who speaks a better word, the one who is God forever and a day, the one who is ancient of days. Lord, we just pray right now against depression, against anxiety, against worry, against fear, against discouragement, against negative self-talk, against these lies that we've believed for too long. We say no longer. Not another inch, not another moment, not another day. That will not steal from my life anymore. I am who you say I am, Lord. I am who you say that I am. I look to Scripture for my truth. I look to God for my truth. I don't look to the world. I don't look to what's been said before. I don't look to what I've believed before. All of that is garbage. All of that is the past. All of that is lies and false and counterfeit. I can see through. I've been given discernment. I've been given truth. I've been given hope. I've been given a sharp mind, a strong mind, a creative mind, a lovely mind, a worthy mind, a noble mind, a pure mind. Lord, you have done your redemption in my mind, and I can think your thoughts because I have been given the mind of Christ. This is the truth. If any moment comes along where I feel weak, I slam that door shut and I say, no way. Lord Jesus, help me in this moment. Help me remember who I am in you. Holy Spirit, rise up in my spirit. Speak the better word to me. Give me your mind again today that I could dwell on your thoughts. Lord, I don't want to give negative thoughts a single inch in my life. I think your thoughts about me, your thoughts about them, your thoughts about you, your thoughts about the world, your thoughts about hope, your thoughts, Lord. I think kingdom thoughts, holy thoughts, righteous thoughts, good thoughts. Say it with me. I have the mind of Christ.
cutting carbs. I need to drop my belly fat.
If you want to drop this.
Hey everyone, Jeremy Bennett here. Let's look at how powerful your mind is. Let's compare your mind to the most sophisticated man-made device ever created, the computer. The average computer can hold about 250,000 pictures, 20,000 songs, and hundreds of full-length videos. Nowadays on something the size of my finger. Crazy. But let's compare it to your mind. Your mind can perform an estimated 10 quadrillion operations per second without you even knowing it. Wild. Ask yourself right now, what's making your blood flow throughout your veins with the perfect amount of pressure to keep you alive? What's making your heart beat right now? Are you consciously commanding your heart to beat right now? No. What's maintaining your body core temperature to the perfect degree to keep you alive? What's doing the 6 trillion things to your 60 trillion cells every single second? It's something called your subconscious mind. This is the powerhouse to who you are. Your cat has it, even your puppy has it. But of all the things that your subconscious mind can do, it can't do one thing. And this thing can help you attract good things into your life, or can absolutely demolish your health. What is that one thing it can't do? It can't distinguish between a real event and something you merely think about. Sounds absolutely ridiculous, right? What happens when you have a nightmare? You wake up, your heart is pounding, you're sweating, and you're anxious beyond words. The nightmare existed in your mind. You weren't in any real danger at all. But your mind didn't know that. You physiologically reacted as if the nightmare was actually taking place in reality. There was a study conducted where a doctor hooked up an elite athlete, a professional skier, to a device that measured the athlete's muscle fibers. He told the skier to merely think about skiing down a hill without moving a muscle.
If you're selling something,
the act of thinking about skiing down the hill actually made the same muscle fibers that would have actually fired off if he were to be actually skiing fire off from thoughts. This has been demonstrated time after time with the placebo effect. Group A suffering from a particular illness gets prescribed a pharmaceutical FDA-approved drug specifically designed to treat that illness. Group B suffering from the same illness gets a sugar pill, thinking it's real medication. Both groups get cured. In fact, the New England Journal of Medicine published a study involving 2 groups suffering from the same degenerative knee disorder. Group A had a surgery designed to scope out the knee and relieve the symptoms of the disorder. Group B, with the permission of the family, had a fake surgery. A placebo surgery, thinking that they had a real surgery. Only 3 small incisions were made in the kneecap, but no real surgery was performed. Both groups reported that the surgery was a success. In fact, researchers are suggesting that a minimum of 1/3 of all medical treatment, including surgery, is due to the belief that the treatment is going to work. The placebo effect. Most people don't realize that there is also something called the nocebo effect. It's practically the opposite of the placebo effect. The mind, instead of curing illness, contributes to illness. That's what a hypochondriac is. Their belief that they're going to develop a disease actually causes them to experience the symptoms of it. Whatever belief you hold in your subconscious mind will become your reality. Bottom line. That's how hypnosis works. The hypnotist implants the idea in the back of their subject's mind, and the subject experiences whatever they hold there. If they hold the belief that there's a spider on their arm, their eyes actually see a spider on their arm. An amazing demonstration occurs when the hypnotist walks towards his subject with his finger extended. He tells the subject that his finger is hot and burning. The hypnotist slowly touches the subject on their arm, and a blister actually forms in the exact place that the finger touched. Now, this is crucial to understand in all healing. Free will, as we understand it, is practically an illusion. In fact, 2 to 4% of the time, you decide what you want to do. You actually make the decision. 96 to 98% of the time, you don't. You're on autopilot. Your subconscious mind controls your decisions 96 to 98% of the time. Don't believe me? Do you like ice cream? If you do, snap your fingers and stop liking it. Do you enjoy watching sports? Snap your fingers and stop enjoying it. You can't. 96 to 98% of the time, everything we crave, desire, and act upon comes from what we hold predominantly in the back of our subconscious minds. Whatever we hold predominantly in the back of our subconscious minds, we are attracted to in life. What happens when you buy a new car? It's the only car you see on the road for the next 2.5 weeks. You saw those cars before you bought your car, but why didn't they stand out to you? Because you didn't own that car yourself. You weren't thinking about it yourself. What you hold in your mind, you're attracted to in life. That's how subliminal ads work so effectively. They work so effectively that they are banned in over 10 countries as a way to advertise. So if what you hold in the back of your subconscious mind shapes your reality, what shapes your subconscious mind? Practically everything that you're exposed to, everything that you see, hear, smell, taste, and feel is shaping your subconscious mind. Let's look at some specifics. Television. Here's a scary stat. By the time a child finishes elementary school, that child has witnessed an estimated 8,000 simulated murders on TV. All of these extremely graphic scenes are sinking back into their minds. And don't be tricked by Hollywood or cartoons. In the most important developmental years, when a child should be taught compassion and understanding, extremely intelligent minds behind the creation of perceived harmless children's cartoons are sinking violence into the back of their minds. Don't be fooled. What are you listening to on the radio? Every single word or thought you hold in your mind has a particular vibrational frequency. Negative words or intentions have slower vibrational frequencies, and positive words have higher vibrational frequencies. This is a song by Lady Gaga called Bad Romance. Some of the lyrics are, I want your drama, I want your ugly, I want your disease, I want a bad, bad romance. Our thoughts create us. We have to be extremely careful with what we are feeding our minds. Music can be beautiful and beneficial, but it can also have a negative impact on your health. Choose wisely. When I was growing up, the most violence we had on video games was Mario and Luigi jumping over turtles' heads. This is what our youth are playing today. These gruesome, extremely graphic images are sinking into the backs of their subconscious minds, weakening their immune systems and having astronomical, gradual negative effects on their health. Nobody's saying that these games are going to cause them to pick up a gun and go shoot somebody, but these games are affecting their health. There is zero doubt about that. What happens when you gossip? In order for you to gossip, you have to hold a negative memory and negative thought inside of your mind. You not only think about that negative memory, you share it with the other person that you're talking to. The second you hold negative thoughts in your mind, the biochemistry of your brain changes and you release cortisol, the stress hormone, into your blood, which then weakens your immune system, inhibits the actions of your white blood cells, increases the chances of infection, and even promotes weight gain. All from gossiping, all from your thinking. You can't gossip without hurting yourself. Remember that. But of everything you can expose yourself to, there is nothing more important than the thoughts you hold in your mind. We have on average 60,000 thoughts a day. And the reality is, not only are most of these thoughts the same thoughts we had yesterday, but they are negative thoughts, either dwelling on something bad in the past or fearing something that could potentially happen in the future. The second we have these negative thoughts, the second we release cortisol, the stress hormone, into our blood. Our thoughts create us. Most people believe that situations cause them anxiety, stress, or cause them to be depressed. The reality is this: there is absolutely no situation in the entire universe that can cause someone to experience anxiety. None. It's your psychological reaction to the situation that can cause you to experience anxiety, not the situation itself. This is crucial to understand. Why is it that when one person skydives, their brain releases endorphins, the good feeling chemical, into their blood, while releasing cortisol into another's? It's the same situation. How can the company of one person cause excitement in one person while making another person stressed? It's because it's never the situation that causes anyone to experience anxiety, but their reaction to it. You create your anxiety, not a situation. When you truly fundamentally understand this truth, that's when you realize that you control your anxiety, not a situation. It's one of the most liberating feelings you can ever experience. If you create it, you can take it away. Your thoughts control your life. You are the creator of your everything. Choose your thoughts wisely. God bless.
That's my man's right there. Oh, come on. Where y'all going?
So, our goal today is to get an understanding of what our mind is. Let's look at some things that our mind can do.
For most of us, thinking is at least somewhat unpleasant. We try to avoid it where possible. For example, I asked these guys, how long does it take for the Earth to go around the Sun?
What do you reckon, cuz?
Is it 24 hours?
Obviously a day.
This problem, which has been given to thousands of college students.
You go into a toy store, and there's a toy bat and a toy ball. Together they cost $1.10. And the bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost?
10 cents. We're all wrong, aren't we?
If you think about it for just a second, it's obvious that the ball can't cost 10 cents. Because if it did, then the bat would cost $1.10 and the two items together would cost $1.20. The correct answer is 5 cents. Now the point of these questions is not that they're difficult. Any of these people could have quickly checked their answer if they wanted to. The point is that they don't check. Because thinking is uncomfortable. It takes effort.
That's my man's right there. Putting us up on game.
Hey, the Earth doesn't take one day to get around the sun. It takes like a year.
Now I think it would be easy to put these mistakes down to stupidity and believe that you, being much smarter, could never fall into such traps. But then I think you'd be fooling yourself. I think these examples reveal blind spots in all of our thinking due to the fundamental way that our brains work. Now one way of modeling how the brain operates is as though there are two systems at work. Psychologists call them System 1 and System 2, but maybe it's useful to think of them as characters. So let's call System 1 Gun and System 2 Drew. You are Drew. He represents your conscious thought, the voice in your head.
I am who you think you are.
He's the one capable of following instructions. He can execute a series of steps. If you're asked to calculate 13 times 17 in your head, for example, he's the one who has to do it.
Can I just use my calculator?
No.
All right. 17 times...
Drew is lazy. It takes effort to get Drew to do anything, and he is slow. But he's the careful one, capable of catching and fixing mistakes.
221.
Now meet System 1, Gun. He is incredibly quick, which he needs to be since he's constantly processing copious amounts of information coming in through your senses. He picks out the relevant bits and discards the rest, which is most of it. And he works automatically, without you, Drew, being consciously aware of what he is doing. For example, when you spot some text, he reads it before you can even decide whether or not you want to read it. Gun fills in the gaps. For example, what does this say? Did you notice that the H in the and the A in cat are actually the same symbol? But you had no trouble reading it because Gun made the correct automatic assumption. So although Drew is unaware of what Gun is doing, it's Gun's perceptions that become the basis for your conscious thoughts. The way I like to think of it, each of these characters is related to one of your main memory structures. Gun's automatic responses are made possible by long-term memory, the library of experiences you've built up over your lifetime. In contrast, Drew exists entirely within working memory, so he's only capable of holding 4 or 5 novel things in mind at a time. This is perhaps one of the best known findings from psychology, that our capacity to hold and manipulate novel information is incredibly limited, like when trying to remember a string of random numbers.
6, 7, 5, 5, 3, 1.
Yes. But we are able to overcome these limitations if the information is familiar to us. For example, let me give you 4 random digits, 7, 1, 0, 2. Now these would normally take up most of your working memory capacity just to remember, but if you reverse them, 2017, they are now just one thing, the present year. The process of grouping things together according to your prior knowledge is called chunking, and you can actually hold 4 or 5 chunks in working memory at once. So the larger the chunks, the more information you can actively manipulate at one time. Learning is then the process of building more and bigger chunks by storing and further connecting information in long-term memory, essentially passing off tasks from Drew to Gun. But in order for this to happen, Drew first has to engage with the information actively and effortfully, often multiple times. For example, when you were first learning to tie your shoelaces, you probably recited a rhyme to help you remember what to do next, using up all your working memory in the process. But after doing it over and over and over again, it gradually became automatic. That is, Drew doesn't have to think about it anymore because Gun's got it. Musicians and sports stars refer to this as muscle memory, though of course the memory is not in the muscles, it's still in the brain, just controlled by Gun.
You can practice everything exactly as it is and exactly as it's written, but at just such a speed that you have to think about and know exactly where you are and what your fingers are doing and what it feels like.
Slow, deliberate, conscious practice repeated often enough leads to this. I'd bet 99% of the time what appears to be superhuman ability comes down to the incredible automation skills of Gun, developed through the painstaking, deliberate practice of Drew. What's interesting is it's actually possible to see how hard Drew is working just by looking at someone. Try this task. I'm going to show you 4 digits. I want you to read them out loud, and then after 2 beats, I want you to say each number back on the beat, but adding 1 to each digit. So as an example, 7291 should be 8302. This is called the add 1 task, and it forces Drew to hold these digits in memory while making manipulations to them. Now it's important to say the numbers back on the beat. Try this one. To make it harder, you can try adding 3 instead of 1. Ready? Now what you're unaware of is that as you're completing this task, your pupils are dilating. When Drew is hard at work, as he is in this task, you have a physiological response, including increased heart rate, sweat production, and pupil dilation. Watch how the pupils of these participants enlarge as they perform the add 1 and add 3 tasks.
4, 3, 9, 7, 2. 5, 4, 0, 8, 3.
Excellent, nicely done.
It requires a lot of thinking.
I know. That's the point.
6, 9, 1, 6. 7, 0, 2, 7.
When this research was originally carried out, the researchers made a surprising observation. When the participants were not engaged with the task but were just chatting with the experimenters, their pupils didn't really dilate at all. This indicates that the add 1 and add 3 tasks are particularly strenuous for System 2, and that most of our day-to-day life is a stroll for Drew, with most tasks handled automatically by Gun. Just as we spend a lot of our lives lounging around, our brains spend most of their time doing the mental equivalent. And I don't mean to make that sound like a bad thing. This is how our brains evolved to make the best use of resources. For repetitive tasks, we developed automatic ways of doing things, reserving Drew's limited capacity for things that really need our attention. But in some circumstances, there can be mix-ups. For example, I moved to Australia in 2004, and one of the first things I learned was that to turn the lights on, you flick the switch down. My whole life growing up in Canada, Gun had automated that up means on. So no matter how well I, Drew, knew that down was on in Australia, I would for years continually switch the lights off when entering a room and on when leaving. When Destin learned to ride the backwards bicycle with its steering reversed, it took months to overcome his automated habit. And once he had done that, he couldn't easily go back to riding a normal bike. Understanding Gunn and Drew also explains errors in the bat and ball question. It's Gunn who first perceives the key pieces of information, that together the bat and ball cost $1.10, the bat costs $1 more than the ball, so the ball costs
10 cents. 10 cents.
Gunn immediately had an answer that he blurted out automatically. Meanwhile, Drew, without being consciously aware that the answer came from Gunn, endorsed the idea without checking it. After all, the answer sounded reasonable and Drew is lazy. So how do you get Drew to do more work? Well, researchers have found at least one way. When they gave out a clearly printed test, including the bat and ball question, to incoming college students, 85% got at least one wrong. But when they printed the test in a hard-to-read font with poor contrast, the error rate dropped to 35%. A harder-to-read test resulted in more correct answers. And the explanation for this is simple. Since Gunn can't quickly jump to an answer, he hands off the task to Drew, who then invests the required mental effort to reason his way to the correct answer. When something is confusing, Drew works harder, and when Drew works harder, you're more likely to reach the right answer and remember the experience. This is something I think the advertising industry knows about and is using to its advantage. A few years ago, again in Australia, I saw a giant billboard that had just 2 letters on it. UN. There was no logo, no indication of what it was for, and this seems to go against all the basic principles of advertising, to show what the product does, how it's better than the competition, and use clear branding and maybe a jingle to make it memorable. The goal is usually to make the message as easy to understand as possible, so Drew doesn't have to work very hard. But if you look at a lot of effective advertising today, it's changed to be more confusing. As the UN campaign rolled out across Sydney, I saw ads like this one in bus shelters. Unexplained. With UN, there is no stress, just unstress. No hassle, just unhassle. With UN, you can undo what you did. You can undrive through the car wash with the window down, or unbreakdance in front of your teenage son and his mates. UN makes life relaxing and unreal. Un your life. Be happy and live for now. Don't worry, unworry. Can you guess what the ads were for? They're actually for insurance. Now that advertising is everywhere, Gunn is skilled at filtering it out. It's automatic. If I just saw another insurance ad, I never would have given it a second thought. But something that doesn't make sense? That's something Gunn can't deal with, so he hands it off to Drew. This same realization has been happening in education. Lectures, which have long been the dominant teaching method, are now on the decline. Like the old form of advertising, they're too easy to tune out. And often, especially in science lectures, too many new pieces of information are presented, and that exceeds Drew's capacity because he doesn't have big enough chunks to break the material into. In place of lectures, universities are introducing workshops, peer instruction, and formats where students are forced to answer more questions, do more work than just listen and take notes. And this will undoubtedly make Drew work harder, which is good because that's how learning happens. But a lot of students don't like it because it requires more effort. Just as it's hard to motivate someone to get off the couch and exercise, it's hard to get Drew to give his full effort. There's an appeal to doing things you already know. For the musician to play the same familiar songs that Gunn has already automated that feel and sound good. To watch videos that give you the sensation of understanding without actually learning anything. To always drive with the GPS on so you never get lost, but you also never learn the way. If you really want to learn and get better at anything, have any chance of becoming an expert, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable. Because thinking takes effort. It involves fighting through confusion, and for most of us, that's at least somewhat unpleasant.
I think they nailed it. Hold on. Alright. Well, hold on.
For most of us, thinking is at least somewhat unpleasant.
I mean, it's crazy to think about it. Like, it used to cost millions to advertise on TV, and now, because of streaming, even with $50, I mean, you can advertise on TV.
You probably think you're in complete control of your decisions and thoughts, but how often are they guided by something else? Something you don't even notice occurring deep within your mind. Here are 21 cognitive mind traps, fallacies, bias.
We need to understand what our mind is instead of just saying mental health or guided finding your mental health or knowing what it is. We need to get some understanding and some ways to be able to use it before we can just condition or do anything else.
And other phenomenon that exist. Here are 21 cognitive mind traps, fallacies, biases, and other phenomenon that exists within your brain. strange things that are hardwired into all human minds. You may go through your entire life or well into adulthood completely unaware that you're carrying around these thinking errors and mental shortcuts that influence your day-to-day thinking. You can't turn them off or delete them from your brain, but being one of the few people that can notice when they arise in your mind and knowing the situations they're likely to act upon your decision-making is one of the first steps to becoming a more thoughtful and rational thinker. This two-part series is mainly inspired by the works of Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman and his amazing book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Cognitive dissonance. A fox snuck up to a vine. He stared intently at the juicy purple overripe grapes. He tried to get at the grapes, but they were too high. Frustrated, he tried again. He launched himself upward, but came no closer to the fruit. He leapt for a third time, this time landing with a thud. Still no grapes. The fox turned up his nose. I don't really care. Only grapes that aren't even ripe. Why would I want sour grapes? He turned around and walked back into the forest. This is one of Aesop's fables, and also where we get the term sour grapes from. The fox had three choices: get to the grapes, admit that he wasn't smart or skilled enough to obtain the grapes, or to reinterpret the situation retrospectively. Or put simply, create a new belief that is in conflict with the first belief. When we choose option 3, and we have two held beliefs that are in conflict with one another, that is an example of cognitive dissonance. If you interview for a job but someone else gets it, instead of reasoning that the other person was better, you tell yourself that the job was no good anyway, or that the interviewer was unfair. When people can't get what they want, they often tell themselves it isn't what they wanted anyway. When people don't want to follow through on something, they often find new beliefs to rationalize the action to fit the first belief. You think all rich people are greedy and evil, but you also want to be rich. The dissonance leads to discomfort, mental stress, and anxiety. If the dissonance grows more intense, it can lead to depression. If you notice dissonance, you can ask yourself, what are the two beliefs that are competing and are incompatible? Am I telling myself this new belief because I couldn't get what I wanted? Or is this new belief because I need an excuse to explain away my first belief? What actions can I take to change my behavior or mindset and eliminate the dissonance? Because when it comes to cognitive dissonance, you can play the clever fox all you want, but you'll never get the grapes that way. The spotlight effect. You arrive 5 minutes late to the office and you feel like everyone is judging you. It's your first day at the gym and you feel like everyone is watching you. You spill a small amount of sauce on your shirt and you feel so embarrassed because you think the whole party is going to notice. The spotlight effect is the phenomenon in which people tend to believe people are observing them more than they are. People are seldom interested in you and your actions as much as you think. So do yourself a favor, stop overestimating how much people are observing you and reduce the anxiety that is probably just the result of the spotlight effect. The anchoring effect. Whenever we have to guess something, let's say the population of Russia, we use anchors, starting with something we know for sure to be true, so it must be greater than 1, must be less than 7 billion, and is less than the population of China. We then take these anchors and explore the unfamiliar territory. Unfortunately, we use anchors when we don't need to. Take a moment to pause and look at these two questions. Is the height of the tallest redwood tree more or less than 1,200 feet? What is your best guess about the height of the tallest redwood? If we ask Group A these two questions and Group B these two questions, we would consistently get very different answers because of the anchoring effect. The words and numbers we use anchors people's decisions. But the anchoring effect doesn't only apply to numbers that appear informative, such as in the tree example. According to Kahneman, anchors that are obviously random can be just as effective as potentially informative anchors. An experiment was conducted on German judges with an average of 15 years experience. Each judge was read a description of a woman who had been shoplifting, then asked to roll a pair of dice, which were loaded to only add up to 3 or 9. As soon as the dice stopped, they were asked to answer how long they would sentence this woman. The judges who rolled a 9, on average, gave her an 8-month sentence. The judges who rolled a 3, on average, gave her a 5-month sentence. The researchers found that the anchoring effect was influencing their judgments. Numerous other studies using arbitrary numbers like the last digits of phone numbers or social security numbers also confirmed our anchoring bias. In sales and negotiations, anchors are being used all the time, and there will be people who are willing and able to set up this mind trap and exploit the anchoring effect against you. The car salesman setting a high price from the start so that the price that he actually wants to get from you seems like a good deal. The $150 dress at the front of the store sets the anchor for the $50 dress at the back of the store. Online stores, salary negotiations, and real estate deals are all playgrounds for the anchoring effect. And it's one of our most powerful biases. You can't turn it off, but you can remind yourself of your vulnerability to it and try to proactively set your own mental anchors before going into any sales or negotiation environment. Take a look at these examples. Let's say I want to sell my book. You can get my online course for $1,999, or you can get my book for just $15. I anchor you to the higher price first, so that the price of my book seems like a bargain. If I wanted to sell my course, on the other hand, I would need to find a better anchor. It costs $135,000 to go to college and learn the same things I'm going to teach you in my online course for only $1,999. If Sarah wanted to buy a $50,000 car and experiment with anchoring, she wouldn't show her partner a bunch of similar priced cars. She would show him a few $90,000 cars she likes first, and after she gets an audible gasp at the price, then she would show him the car she actually wants. And now it doesn't seem as expensive. The price you anchor first determines how people feel about the value of your offer. They have sent us the asking price for the home. Let's not let the numbers influence our thinking. Set it aside, let's perform our own due diligence and arrive at our own number. Our objective in this negotiation is to move first and get them anchored to this number. The halo effect. What do you think about Alan and Ben? Alan is intelligent, industrious, impulsive, critical, stubborn, and envious. Ben is envious, stubborn, critical, impulsive, industrious, and intelligent. If you're like most people, you see Alan in a better light than you do Ben, even though the traits mentioned are exactly the same. When it comes to the halo effect, sequence matters. More weight is given to the first piece of information we receive. The first piece of information helps us quickly create a story of the person or situation in our minds. Sure, Alan is stubborn and envious, but that is only because he is intelligent and wants to win in business. And yes, Ben is intelligent, but he uses that intelligence in envious ways. The halo effect occurs when a single initial aspect of a person or thing determines and affects or outshines how we see the full picture. When you first start dating someone, both parties in the relationship are on their best behavior. You start to develop a halo of positive thoughts around this person. Small traits you dislike might begin to pop up, but often go unnoticed because the halo, the positive emotions, and the initial information you gathered on this person is blinding out any of the negatives. The honeymoon phase of a relationship is often when the halo effect influences your judgment the most. If we learn that someone graduated from a prestigious university, the halo effect will distort all other traits we attribute to that person without any evidence. Bernie Madoff was the darling of Wall Street, a legendary investor. The amazing returns and reputation of his company were the halo that made people also conclude his company must be trustworthy. The halo outshone the numbers that made no sense and the underlying fact that he was running the biggest Ponzi scheme in history. Numerous studies have shown that attractive people are automatically perceived as nicer, more honest, and more intelligent. The halo effect can also be found in schools. If a student answers 2 essay questions and the teacher gives the first essay a high grade, he or she is prone to subconsciously give that more weight and give the second essay a higher grade also, and vice versa for low grades. In the work environment, the standard practice of most meetings is to have open discussions on a topic. Daniel Kahneman, in the book Thinking Fast and Slow, argues that it is better to gather independent judgments on the topic from everyone in the group before the issue is discussed, because far too often the opinions of the first people to talk are given too much weight and influence the group's input, especially if the boss speaks first. Modern research suggests that the old saying, "first impressions last," turns out to be true. After meeting someone for the first time, our judgment of that person can influence us for a long time into the future. We jump to conclusions and our perception of true characteristics is distorted by the halo effect. To combat this, try to move beyond the first appearance of someone or something and decorrelate error. Remember that your brain is trying to help you by making the most complete story it can on the limited information it is provided. The problem is that these mental shortcut stories we tell ourselves about a person or thing are often inaccurate from reality. He knows nothing about her personality. All he's going by is how good looking she is. He's succumbing to the halo effect. Hey look, this new applicant graduated from Harvard. She doesn't have any experience in this position, but I think we should interview her anyway. Let's gather ideas independently on this topic before the meeting. I don't want my ideas to influence the group's.
Trump's Project 2025 would take Black America backwards. It would strip away our voting rights protections and bans abortion. Kamala Harris will stand up to Trump and his dangerous plans to control our lives, because Trump is out for himself, while Kamala Harris is for the people.
Gambler's fallacy. 3 times a coin is flipped and lands on heads each time. Let's say that someone forces you to wager thousands of dollars of your own money on the next toss. Would you bet on heads or tails? If you think like most people, you will almost always choose tails, although heads is equally likely. But why? We believe in some kind of balancing force in the universe. If we ask people to choose which sequence is more probable, most would pick the top sequence. But both sequences are equally probable. We generally underestimate the likelihood of streaks occurring by chance. We are led to believe that something needs to change due to the gambler's fallacy. However, there is no such balancing force. The coin cannot remember that heads was flipped 3 times in a row, just as the ball cannot remember that it landed on black. Casinos love the gambler's fallacy because it creates the illusion in the gambler's mind that they can predict where the balance of the dice or roulette wheel will go next. This fallacy can apply anywhere there is a sequence of decisions. That awkward feeling you get when you've answered 5 C's in a row of a multiple choice exam is this fallacy at work. A University of Chicago review found asylum judges were 19% less likely to approve an asylum seeker if they had just approved the previous 2. The same person applying for a loan was more likely to get approved for a loan if the previous 2 applicants were rejected, and was more likely to be rejected if the previous 2 applicants were approved. Similar findings were also found when analyzing the sequence of decisions of baseball umpires. Take a closer look at the independent and interdependent events around you. Independent events are not influenced by balancing forces of nature. The contrast effect. If you see some leather seats for $3,000, they may seem a little expensive. If you're buying an $80,000 car, on the other hand, the $3,000 leather seat upgrade seems almost like nothing. Research shows that people will walk an extra 10 minutes if it means saving $10 on food. However, nearly all wouldn't walk 10 minutes to save $10 on a $1,000 suit. It's easy to think something is attractive, large, or expensive when it sits next to something ugly, small, or cheap. Absolute judgments can be difficult to make. Try to catch yourself the next time you go shopping to see if your purchasing decisions are being influenced by the contrast effect. Confirmation bias. You have an existing belief about something. You go in search of evidence that supports that belief, which further reinforces the belief. And you continue this cycle. If you come across evidence that doesn't support your belief, you filter the disconfirming evidence, and your brain forgets it after a short period of time. We never like to learn we've believed in a falsehood or made a bad decision, which is why we tend to filter what information we pay attention to. This is confirmation bias, the tendency to interpret new information so that it becomes compatible with our existing theories and beliefs. This bias is subtle, unconscious, and always present in the mind when rational thinking is needed. As opposed to the scientific method, where you form a hypothesis or ask a question, gather evidence, and then test the hypothesis, this is hard work and may entail some unpleasant truths. This is John. John begins with a simple theory or belief. He turns to Google. He subconsciously goes in search of the first information that confirms his belief, and the confirmation bias takes care of filtering out the rest. Finding information that proves you are wrong is one of the best ways to determine if you are right, and philosophers of science would tell us to combat this bias by trying to refute the hypothesis. But rarely do people actively try to seek out disconfirming evidence to their beliefs. We hate to be wrong, so why would we actively try to seek out information that is in conflict with those beliefs? To make matters worse, the biggest platforms now tailor content to personal interests and browsing history, supercharging confirmation bias on a mass scale. We find ourselves in a sea of one-sided content amongst communities of like-minded people, also referred to as echo chambers, thereby reinforcing our convictions, and the confirmation bias becomes stronger. Not only do we need to combat our own confirmation bias, social platforms are aiding this bias by filtering what we are shown and not exposing us to opposing points of view. The more you conform the facts to fit your beliefs, the narrower your perspective becomes, until that narrow reality becomes all that you can see. Confirmation bias is the genesis of the I'm always correct ego, especially in political discourse. What planet are they living on? They must be living in an alternate reality. I'm completely right about this. Look at all the facts on my side. As a result of confirmation bias, we have a high degree of confidence. We feel deep down that we are right. If someone challenges our opinions, we tend to become defensive and even hostile. As opposing perspectives become narrower, discourse about facts that are being interpreted and filtered differently becomes nearly impossible because both sides of an argument are seeing the evidence through the lens of their theories and only looking out for what confirms their existing beliefs. Echo chambers are the flywheels for frequent repetition and dissemination of ideas. The same ideas are shared, liked, and repeated, and any new beliefs are quickly shut down. All divergent thinking and opinions begin to disappear. When people hear the same thing repeated enough times, the facts may as well go out the window. According to Daniel Kahneman, a reliable way to make people believe in falsehood is frequent repetition, because familiarity is not easily distinguished from truth. There is no way to eliminate confirmation bias, only ways to reduce its effect on you. First is to simply become aware that this mind trap exists. If time does allow you to reflect, try to think gray. If you truly want to become an independent thinker, you need to suspend judgments, explore the gray areas, and expand beyond the hive mind of the group. Try to get your information from a variety of sources and avoid being influenced into a belief because it is what others are telling you to think or has been repeated enough times you accept it as truth. Confirmation bias is a perspective narrower. Try to widen your perspective because in most cases the objective facts lie somewhere in between in the gray area. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. You buy a certain brand of car and all of a sudden you start seeing that car everywhere, whereas you didn't in the past. When you learn a new word or concept, suddenly you start seeing it everywhere in your life. You start thinking, wow, this is weird. How is it possible I've never seen this word in my life, and now I've seen it 3 times this week? Or why do I keep seeing those new shoes I bought everywhere I go? They must be becoming so popular. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon is an illusion in which, after noticing something for the first time, there is a tendency to notice it more often. It occurs when increased awareness of something creates the illusion that it is appearing more often. This phenomenon is augmented by 2 other biases: the recency effect, which inflates the importance of recent stimuli, and confirmation bias, which confirms in your mind these strange coincidences you think you're having and then perpetuates your search to keep confirming that these coincidences must have some kind of meaning. Basically, our brains are master pattern recognition machines that are always searching for meaning in data. What is amazing are all the patterns and stimuli flooding past you every single day that your brain simply ignores because it's not in your awareness. We only see the things we are looking out for. In reality, you have most likely seen that word or car a number of times, but your mind simply wasn't interested in noticing it. Zeigarnik effect. We can almost always remember incomplete tasks, but we easily forget completed tasks. To put simply, incomplete tasks will stick around in our memory longer than completed tasks. Originally, it was believed that the only way to prevent the Zeigarnik effect from gnawing away at our thoughts was to complete the incomplete tasks. However, further research into the Zeigarnik effect found that simply having or writing down a plan to complete the task was enough to stop the effect. So if you find yourself awake at night with these incomplete tasks stressing you out, grab a pen and pad and write down a quick plan to get the job done. Getting the task out of your head and onto paper combats this effect and will give you more peace of mind. The paradox of choice. At a supermarket, 2 experiments were conducted. In the first experiment, 24 different types of jam were available to freely test and buy for a discounted price. In the second experiment, only 6 different types of jam were available to freely test and buy for a discounted price. The first experiment attracted 60% of shoppers and 3% bought jam. The second experiment attracted 40% of shoppers and 30% bought jam. Even though more shoppers were initially attracted to more variety, with less choices the supermarket was able to sell 10x the amount of jam. This is the paradox of choice. For most people, a large selection of any given product is seen as a net positive. But once the number of choices increases past a threshold, our subjective state becomes negative and leads to inner paralysis and decision fatigue. The paradox of choice can also be found in modern-day dating. In the past, you would marry people you met locally. Nowadays, we have too many choices. And you may think that all that variety would make it easier to find the perfect partner, but more optimal decisions can be made when given a smaller amount of options to choose from. When faced with a small number of options, people can easily weigh the pros and cons of each and be fairly satisfied with whichever option they chose. When faced with a large number of options, knowing which option is best becomes more difficult, and the more options there are, the more chances there are of feeling regret. With more options, the more you feel the need to compare. The attractive features of the alternatives diminish the satisfaction in your final choice. Even if we made an excellent decision, the opportunity costs of the other options subtract from the overall satisfaction of our choice. Too many choices often leads to people not making any choice and giving up on the endeavor altogether.
Alright, so the reason we watching these is because if we don't even understand the types of mechanisms and things that our mind is using to process our life or a situation or a circumstance, then there's no hope for us to go anywhere. So I wanted to kind of get a good solid slap on what is mind. Oh, this one looked good, but it's kind of long. Yeah, now that one is good.
Did you know that Amazon has a $50 million fund that they have to pay out every month? And here's how you can.
What do you think most people misunderstand about stress?
Yeah, the findings that I think are overlooked tremendously are the following experiment. There's an experiment in animals where a rat is given the opportunity to run on a treadmill, and rats and rodents of all kinds love running on treadmills. You know, there are these interesting. We'll see who catches this fly first.
Yeah, I'm ready, man.
Yeah, I think there's even a study from Hoppy Hofstra's lab at Harvard that showed that if you put running wheels in fields, that rodents will run there in the middle of the night and run on them. That's how insanely obsessed with running.
They're just energetic. They want to go.
There's something rewarding about it for them. But in any event, it lowers their blood pressure. It leads to improvements in a number of metrics that you expect. And you see the same thing in humans, right? Who run on a treadmill or run outdoors or swim, cardiovascular exercise. Okay. Well, Sapolsky and I love to talk about an experiment where they took 2 different cages with animals. One is running voluntarily, but then that running wheel is tethered to a running wheel in another cage that encloses an animal, forces it to run every time the other one runs. So forced exercise versus voluntary exercise. And the takeaway is very straightforward. Voluntary exercise leads to all sorts of improvements in health metrics, resting heart rate, blood pressure, blood glucose, resting blood glucose, et cetera, waking blood glucose. The animal that's forced to exercise, you see the opposite. right? So it's not exercise per se. It's something about being forced to exercise causes decrements in a number of health metrics. And you see the same thing in humans. So what's wild is my colleague, Dr. Ali Crum, Department of Psychology at Stanford, has done these beautiful experiments on mindset and belief. These are not placebo effects. And what she's shown in a just absolutely spectacular way is that if people watch a short video about all the ways in which stress can really diminish your health, well, then indeed stress diminishes their health. Whereas if a separate group watches a factual, also 5-minute, also factual tutorial on all the ways that stress can enhance performance by harnessing your ability to focus, memory formation, et cetera, all of which is true. That's indeed what you see.
Can I give you my favorite one that I learned about over the last year?
Yes.
So the Boston Marathon bombing, 2012, about 10 years ago, 2016 maybe. Anyway, Boston Marathon bombing, a study was done comparing people who had been at the actual marathon while the bomb had gone off and people who had watched 90 minutes or more of news coverage about it. And the people who watched 90 minutes or more of news coverage about it showed a greater stress response than the people who'd literally lived through it.
Interesting. Yeah. The mindset and belief effects are absolutely extraordinary and very real, right? I mean, I think, recently I've been reading and researching a lot about and did a podcast on tenacity and willpower. And there was this idea early on from Baumeister and colleagues that willpower is a limited resource. Some of that
ego depletion?
Ego depletion.
Yes.
It was controversial. They showed that, replenishing glucose in between hard tasks could restore willpower.
They showed that, was it juries or judges that were low in blood glucose were more likely to give harsher sentences, stuff like this?
Yeah, it sort of wicked out to a number of naturalistic situations, and it made good sense. And then my colleague Carol Dweck, also in the psychology department at Stanford, most famously known for her work on growth mindset, did an experiment in which they essentially asked whether or not tenacity and willpower are limited in terms of being some sort of resource, and also whether or not it was somehow linked to glucose availability, fuel in the brain and body, and found that if people thought or were told that willpower was a limited resource, that's indeed what they observed experimentally. But that if they were taught or were told that willpower is unlimited and divorced from glucose levels, well, then that's exactly what you saw.
You're saying that learning about ego depletion and believing that willpower is a limited resource is an information hazard that is self-fulfilling.
Potentially. Now, Baumeister, showed himself to be, pretty determined, when and countered the Dweck counter by showing that if there's a hard task followed by a hard task, then your beliefs about willpower can impact your performance on the second task. So Dweck, aka Dweck is right. But that if you have a hard task, and then another hard task, so back-to-back tasks or more, which is a lot of what life is like, well, then it seems that the willpower is a limited resource, and glucose supporting willpower theory holds up a bit better.
What have you come to believe about the difference between willpower and motivation and discipline? How do kind of all of these fit together in your mind?
Yeah, so willpower and tenacity are related to motivation, but they're not quite the same. I think we should think of motivation as the verb state that moves us from, let's just say, apathy to tenacity. Okay, so it's the verb function that moves us along that continuum. Apathy at one end, tenacity and willpower, strong exertion of willpower at the other end. One of the most interesting structures in the entire nervous system is one that gets very little coverage, unfortunately. In fact, most neuroscientists aren't aware of what its function is, and it's called the AMCC, which is the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. You have one on each side of the brain. The name isn't really important, but we want to the credit of the structure, we should name it the AMCC. The AMCC receives inputs from a lot of interesting brain areas related to reward, related to autonomic function, so how alert or sleepy we are, to prediction error. It's a hub for many, many inputs and outputs. Hormone systems, etc.
When you're 85 years old on your deathbed, you're not going to wish you had fewer crazy stories. So let me introduce you to The School Game.
Beautiful experiments done by my colleague Joe Parvizi at Stanford have shown that if you stimulate this brain area, a tiny little brain area in a human, they immediately feel as if some challenge is impending and they're going to meet that challenge. It's a forward center of mass against challenge response. This has been seen in independent subjects. They do controls where they then tell them they're stimulating, but they're not actually stimulating, and they're like, I don't feel anything. You can turn on and off tenacity and willpower. So there's literally a hub for this. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. I'm going to list off a bunch of peer-reviewed published results in rapid sequence, and I'm happy to point out the substantiation for this, or the references. Okay. Individuals that are dieting or resisting some sort of tempting behavior and are successful in doing that, the size and activity in their AMCC goes up over time and the structure gets bigger. Dieters who fail, flat or downward trajectory of the size and activation of the AMCC. This can be taken too far. Individuals with anorexia nervosa, the most deadly of all psychiatric disorders, where a self-deprivation of food activates excessive reward. There's this kind of loop of reward. Their AMCCs are significantly greater size than others. So there's, this can be taken too far. Super agers, which is a bit of a misnomer because these individuals are people who maintain healthy cognitive function similar to people in their 20s and 30s into their 70s, 80s, and 90s. Their AMCC maintains or increases in size into their later years. Typical agers, the size of, we always hear that you lose brain mass across your lifespan. Well, most of it is from the AMCC. And beautifully, and this is two of my favorite results that really bring this around to a protocol or a takeaway. If people are given an easy task, the AMCC isn't activated. If they're given a hard task, in particular a hard task, physical or cognitive, that they really don't want to do, the AMCC levels of activity go through the roof. And here's what's really cool. They gave aging, people age 60 to 79, the task of adding 3 hours extra per week of cardiovascular exercise. Now, that's a lot, right? 3 1-hour, they call them aerobic classes, but getting their heart rate up to about 65, 70% of maximum. So it's getting into like zone 3-ish area. Yeah, people can look up zone 3, but you nailed it, zone 3. The size of their AMCC increased across that 6-month protocol and offset the normal age-related decline in this brain area in terms of its size. The theory that's starting to emerge is that the AMCC isn't just about tenacity and willpower to push through hard things, that it may actually be related to one's will to live, one's will to continue living. And I think these are some of the most important results. By the way, I didn't participate in any of the research that I just described. I spent a lot of time with that literature, but I think it's so important. I mean, we hear about the amygdala, the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex, all very important brain structures. But if nothing else, hopefully this conversation will put the AMCC on the map.
The one that literally could create your will to live is the one that's been overlooked a little bit.
And it can be. And what's interesting about this structure is that it's involved in generating tenacity and willpower for all things, not just for one situation. And what's really wonderful, I think, about the research literature on this is it's so clear what we need to do. We need to do things. Let's say, like me, you're a person who enjoys weightlifting and you love running. I love those two activities. Well, guess what? Those activities, even if they're hard, like a hard run that I'm really enjoying, or some hard sets in the gym, not going to increase the size or activity of the AMCC. People love to romanticize the utility of those final 2 reps. Sure, okay, pushing to failure, great. Running hard till your lungs burn, great. But if you enjoy that, you're not increasing your amount of tenacity and willpower, at least according to the research data. What's going to do it is doing something what I call micro sucks or macro sucks. And so micro sucks could be all the little things that you don't want to do during the day. Macro sucks could be the larger things. But of course, you don't want to do things that are going to damage you psychologically or physically. Of course. But everyone, I believe, would benefit from picking a few micro sucks.
What are some of your micro sucks or macro sucks that you could?
Willpower can be turned off. I want to be like those people who don't lose AMCC, right?
Sprinkle throughout the day.
Okay, so on a household maintenance level, I maintain a very clean home. I'm constantly throwing things away as well. But there are a few things, like once I exceed a certain number of dishes in the sink, it becomes this, okay, I'll load the dishwasher later type thing. Like a micro suck for me would be like, especially if something's been in there for a while and it's kind of gross and then you got to like work through it. And of course I try and put each dish away as I, dirty them up. But so little things, the things like I really don't want to deal with that right now. That's the kind of thing, those harder tasks where you have to breach some barrier, some resistance, to put it into, Stephen Pressfield language, or our friend David Goggins, right? This idea that one has to callous the mind. I mean, David said that, right?
He's probably got an hypertrophied AMCC that's bigger than most people's.
Probably. And the beauty of having an AMCC that's highly available for activation is that, through the micro and the macro sucks of the day, you have this thing, it's like an engine that you can devote to other things. So then you can devote the AMCC to other endeavors.
I have this thing I called email anxiety, and it's when my unread inbox reaches 3 figures or more. And that's when it kind of follows me around like a poltergeist throughout the day. And that absolutely, for me, that's probably a macro suck. To get through that, it's probably 3 to 4 hours. A lot of it's scheduling. When's this guest coming on? I need to speak to this partner. We got blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I feel that. What else?
It's subjective, right? I mean, what sucks is subjective.
Someone else might love
people.
emails.
Yeah, someone might. And I think that, you've talked a lot on your show with various guests about, when we're in too much comfort, we're not meeting our goals. I love deadlines for that reason. I love deadlines. I love pressure.
I think Parkinson's law is as close to a thermodynamic of productivity as we can get. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you have a deadline, you will meet it.
Right.
If you do not have a deadline, you will mañana until forever.
That's right. And some people, I think, preload the deadline by procrastinating, and then that's what gets their activation energy to a level where they can engage. So I've started thinking about this a lot lately. I love running, but it's interesting. I like to finish at my driveway, and I live on a hill. And actually, this morning I was out for a run, and the gate at the end of the cul-de-sac is my sort of.
This is how AI optimizes my schedule. This meeting got canceled. Hooray! We didn't really want to go.
Designated stop point. So it actually sucked to do the last 20 meters this morning. So there I probably got a little bit of AMCC activation because everything was, the number of negotiations I went through when I turned up my street at the end of this run, whether or not I was going to run this extra 20 meters was ridiculous. I mean, the human brain, struggling to not do this extra 20 meters. It was so silly. So it's gotta hurt a little bit. Again, you don't want to damage yourself, but I think in the context of, for instance, cognitive learning, getting to the point where you finish something and then forcing yourself to do one little extra bit there at the end.
Yeah.
So, I'm not looking for any credit for it, but I want to be very clear that the scientific literature doesn't call these things microsucks. I call them microsucks. Yeah. And I sort of put that out there just to make it clear as to what we're referring to.
Do you know Nick Bear?
I don't.
In Austin, he's an athlete and supplement company owner. Yep. Yeah. Like he's a hybrid athlete.
A larger guy, but he runs really fast.
Does bodybuilding shows, does powerlifting, also runs.
To be clear, I know that large guys run fast, but typically they don't run fast for 20 miles.
Correct.
And he does.
That's accurate. His little catchphrase is "Go one more," and it's interesting. What you're saying here is it's not just about the completion of the thing that you're doing, because a lot of the time, the thing that you choose to do, even the thing that's difficult, is done under your own volition. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. If you do a difficult CrossFit workout, Fran, whatever, 21-15-9 of thrusters and pull-ups, it is awful. It's hell, right? There's literally a name for what your throat feels like once you finish called Fran cough that people get from having taken their heart rate as high as...
Spasming of
the... that taste of metal in the back of your throat. But what people are doing there, although they're doing something that's difficult, it's like volitionally difficult and it's within their domain of enjoyment. Mm-hmm. And what you're saying here is that we're looking to just push ourselves a little bit past that. It's like an unnecessary amount of challenge. And I think that Go One More makes quite a nice reminder for us with the micro suck or the macro suck. Let's push ourselves just a little bit beyond where we would have got our sense of satisfaction, because presumably you get the dopamine, I've completed the task, fuck yeah. And then it's like, and then I do just that tiny little bit more to bring. We'll get back to talking to Andrew in 1 minute, but first I need to tell you about Mudwater. Mudwater is a coffee alternative that tastes like chai and cacao had a baby. It's got 4 functional mushrooms, and with only a fraction the caffeine as a cup of coffee, you will get all of the natural energy without the jitters or crash. Each ingredient was added for a purpose: cacao and chai for a hint of coffee and hot chocolate-like flavor, lion's mane for focus, cordyceps to promote natural energy, and both chaga and reishi to support a healthy immune system. Plus, it's Whole30 approved, 100% USDA organic certified, non-GMO, gluten-free, vegan, and kosher. So, if you're looking for a delicious alternative to your morning coffee, this is a great place to start. Right now, you can get $20 off your first order plus a whole box of good stuff, including creamer and a free frother, by going to the link in the description below or heading to mudwtr.com/modernwisdom. That's mudwtr.com/modernwisdom. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip with Dr. Huberman, you will love the 3-hour episode that you can watch.
Let's try this.
When I first joined Honeybook, I was roughly making $1,500 a month. Fast forward.
This just so I can have us listening to something.
We often hear of remarkable people who, through dedication and practice, seem to become one with their craft. An example of such a person is Cao Fu, a character from Taoist literature who wished to become a skilled charioteer. So he seized the opportunity to apprentice under an expert widely known for his exceptional mastery. Years passed, and Cao Fu served his master without receiving any instruction or lesson. He just worked and followed commands. But rather than becoming disheartened, he displayed commitment, convincing the charioteer that he was worthy of his teachings. One day, the master finally offered him a lesson, but it wasn't what Cao Fu expected. Instead of jumping straight into charioteering, the master put a couple of wooden posts into the ground and had Cao Fu jump from one post to another repeatedly. After much practice, he could glide effortlessly across the wooden post. And so, the master revealed the essence of the practice. It wasn't just about strength or skill, but about a union of intention and action. With the reins, hands, body and mind in harmony, the chariot felt like an extension of Cao Fu himself. The action was effortless as he found himself in a flow state. The master stated, "When your mind is clear and your body is relaxed, you can control 6 bridles without confusion, and 24 hooves will step where you want them. Then the wheels of your chariot will move forward and in reverse and turn left and right with precision and control. You can drive on mountain roads with the same ease as you would on the plains. Your driving will not be different whether your horses are stepping close to the edge of a cliff or running on flat grassland. That is all I have to teach, so remember it well." End quote. The flow state, or being in the zone, is a mysterious thing. It's an optimal state of performance, an idea our minds are fond of, but, ironically, aren't able to create at will. We can't will ourselves into the flow state. On the contrary, the more you force it, the less...
Alright, willpower. Okay, I have met a 96-year-old that had all of her faculties about her before she passed away. She could hold a great conversation with you. It was great being around her. Looking up her age, she was 98. Oh my geez, just a little bit more. Sounds great. Yeah, 98. Dang. You know, I say this to all of us who attribute getting old, well, something aging, to deterioration. All right? Because it's like they said, you have to change the way that you think about things in order for you to get out of these traps and actually be able to use your mind's potential. So aging is not deterioration. All right? Examples: trees. The more a tree ages, yes, it looks a little bit differently, and you can find some of them trees that look old. You tell they look old, but they continue to grow, change, adapt, and do all of these things, so they're not deteriorating at all. As a matter of fact, the oldest trees look great. They look great. So you come up with your own examples in your mind of aging that is not deterioration, but there are some things that deteriorate over time. So let's keep going.
You'll get it. And the more frustrated you become by not getting it, the farther it gets out of reach, until you're so done with trying that you give up entirely and focus on something else. But precisely in those moments, it appears like a fish approaching the fisherman's hook just after he gave up trying. The flow state is unreachable, but not outside of reach. You can't grasp it, it grasps you, but only if you let it. I've been dedicating quite some words to the flow state on this channel, mainly from a Taoistic philosophical viewpoint, including a concept named Wu Wei, which translates to effortless action. With this video, I want to revisit the flow state, but this time I focus on the psychological dimension. What's happening in our brain when we're in the flow state? What does academic research say about it? Why is it so elusive? And perhaps most interestingly, what can we do to achieve it? This video explores the psychology of flow. By the way, if you enjoy reading, check out my 2 anthologies, where ancient thought meets the musings of a modern mind.
That's exactly what came to mind.
Let's begin with a personal story. As far as I remember, I've been an overthinker and overanalyzer. A significant part of my life I've spent in my head, analyzing, daydreaming, contemplating the past and future, not paying attention to the present moment. Now, I only recently learned how to drive a car, which was probably one of the most challenging things I ever had to learn. My driving instructor told me that my thinking is my greatest enemy when learning this skill. I overthink and analyze a lot, which interferes with my driving. After much practice, I finally got my license. As I've been driving for a while now, I noticed that when I'm too much in my head, I get a bit anxious when it's busy on the road and I drive more nervously. But often, all of a sudden, it's like I'm one with my car, the road and other traffic, as if the crowded highway is one giant organism I'm part of. In those moments, I experience the flow state. When contemplating the flow state during driving, I immediately think about a recent trip with my mom and sister to the Ardennes, a forest region in Belgium and Luxembourg, extending into France and Germany with hills, ridges and rivers, only a few hours away from the flatlands I come from. When you're used to everything being as flat as a pancake, because that's what's happening in most of the Netherlands, driving in the hills is a slightly different ballgame. The first thing I noticed is that my car responds differently to going up a mountain compared to descending one, which is the most basic physics. However, for some reason, it startled the Dutch operating system in my brain, which has no software installed dealing with elevations in its environment. This was my baptism of fire, my first time driving abroad on a different terrain. At the beginning of the trip, I felt slightly anxious. I was about to expand my comfort zone. I tried to plan, analyze and sort out all possible scenarios in my head. I wanted to impress my mother and sister with my driving skills. I was a bit worried about the Belgian roads that are notoriously bad and about not understanding the traffic rules of our southern neighbors. So I was driving and driving, passing the city of Eindhoven, crossing the Limburg province toward the border, when dark clouds, thunder and lightning began to appear all around us. It was raining cats, dogs, Democrats, Republicans and Eurosceptics. I could barely see the driver before me, let alone check what was happening 100 meters ahead. My baptism of fire became a baptism of lousy weather and a ridiculously chaotic highway. I remember that that moment pushed me into the present. I had no choice other than to ignore all discursive thoughts and drive. I stopped trying to drive well and just drove well, without even intending to drive well. This sounds paradoxical, because it is. When my desire to drive well ceased, I actually began to drive well. What started as this overanalyzing galore of desperation became an effortless and unexpectedly delightful experience. Mountainsides and curling highways came and went. Cars and trucks overtook me, and I overtook them, as if we were bees, a swarm sharing a common conscience, almost as if something greater than ourselves diligently orchestrated the spectacle of traffic driving between Liège and Namur. Oh, and the Belgian roads were pretty good, especially in the Ardennes. What baffled me was how euphoric it all felt. Just being there, one with the highway, the traffic, the car. And the deeper I fell into this state, the more that anxiety became something alien, something far away, unable to touch me. Looking back on my experience, I couldn't believe that it went so well. It was weird, considering how dangerous driving is, to have felt as comfortable behind the wheel as sitting on a couch watching Netflix while continually paying attention to the highly unpredictable and fast changing. But any attempt to analyze and sort out what constituted my effortless driving and how I did it didn't generate any satisfying answers. I remember my driving instructor saying before my exam, "You can drive, you learned it." It's a simple statement, but profound. When we practice something and practice well and long enough, the things we learn reside within us. They become part of us. So most of the time, it's not a matter of consciously applying what we've learned. It's more about removing the intellectual blockages, getting out of our own ways, so to speak, to allow these abilities to arise. The flow state is elusive, an enigma of the mind, or perhaps from beyond the mind. Yet, there have been people who attempted to unveil its mysteries, to find out how it works and what triggers it. So how does it work? The remainder of this video touches upon research and literature, exploring the psychology behind the flow state and how we can arouse it. One of the leading experts on the flow state is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, a psychologist and university professor who wrote a book named Flow, which became a bestseller. To maintain the flow of this video, I'll just call him Mihai. Mihai reveals that what makes an experience genuinely satisfying is a state of consciousness called flow. Mihai defines the flow state as being engaged in an activity that is both challenging to one's skill level and intrinsically rewarding. In the flow state, we tend to experience intense and focused concentration on the present moment, loss of reflective self-consciousness, a merging of action and awareness, and even an altered sense of time. It's what constitutes an optimal experience, as he describes in his book. It's what a sailor holding a tight course feels when the wind whips through her hair, when the boat lunges through the waves like a colt. Sails, hull, wind, and sea humming, and a harmony that vibrates in the sailor's vein. It is what a painter feels when the colors on the canvas begin to set up a magnetic tension with each other, and a new thing, a living form, takes shape in front of the astonished creator. End quote. He also noticed that such events of optimal experience do not depend on external circumstances. People in horrible conditions, such as imprisonment in concentration camps, have reported these optimal experiences, or flow states, as well. In fact, according to Mihai, the flow state occurs when someone voluntarily stretches his body or mind to its limits to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. So these moments aren't necessarily pleasurable or comfortable. Think about running a marathon or being at the height of a battle in a computer game, wholly immersed in it. These moments take a toll on one's body and mind, yet embody the optimal experience or flow state. But we often hijack the flow state by what Mihai calls psychic entropy, a state of inner disorder and chaos in the mind. It's the opposite of the flow state. Instead of being focused, our attention is scattered. Instead of operating in the present moment, we're all over the place, lingering in the past, worrying about the future. Instead of action and awareness being merged, they are apart from each other, separated by an information overload. In a state of psychic entropy, generally, not much gets done. And what gets done goes less than smoothly. Mihai stated, "Whenever information disrupts consciousness by threatening its goals, we have a condition of inner disorder or psychic entropy, a disorganization of the self that impairs its effectiveness. Prolonged experiences of this kind can weaken the self to the point that it is no longer able to invest attention and pursue its goals." End quote. Psychic entropy can have different causes. There could be too many distractions. For example, you're working on an essay while your WhatsApp web application runs in the same browser and Instagram messages are coming in while listening to a podcast with the television on in the background. These are constant interruptions of information that create a sense of chaos in the mind. Similarly, multitasking can also cause psychic entropy, as doing too many things at once scatters one's attention. Another cause is interpersonal conflict, as it generally occupies the mind. We tend to repeat arguments and imagine confrontations, which takes our focus away from engaging in constructive and enjoyable tasks. Whatever the cause is, it always comes down to excessive information flooding one's consciousness. A prevalent example of this is worrying. When we worry, we try to impose order onto chaos and the unknown. The moments before I drove to the Ardennes, worrying about unfamiliar terrain, Belgian traffic rules, impressing my mom and sister, and the weather conditions caused my psychic entropy. Essentially, I only had one task, driving from point A to point B. But an overload of information overflowing my mind interfered with that one task, leading to anxiety and scattered attention. And amid the psychic entropy behind the wheel, I tried hard to drive well, forcing that smooth and effortless experience on the road, something that initially didn't happen, causing me frustration, which added another layer to my psychic entropy. All this trying to drive as well as possible through analysis ironically led to paralysis. I was standing in my own way. The action was taking place on the road. My awareness was taking place in my thoughts. Something needed to happen, some kind of sudden awakening, some kind of proverbial slap with a stick shocking me out of my head into the midst of action. The satisfying challenge of navigating my car through the storm and the unfamiliar Belgian roads did that pretty well.
No one seems to know this, but Amazon actually has a $50 million fund that they have to pay out every single month.
Problem with the flow state is that it's impossible to force it. You can't will yourself into a flow state using effort. It's as if the more we try to be in a flow state, the less likely we enter it. And that only when we stop trying to conceptualize the flow state, using the intellect to attain it, it may grasp us by surprise, without us even realizing it. So it seems, as from my driving experiences, it's not something to attain, but rather something to allow. But does that make the flow state something consciously unattainable, purely elusive, a random experience that may occur when we're lucky? According to Mihai, the emergence of the flow state isn't entirely random. He noticed that there are conditions for the optimal experience or flow state. The conditions become apparent when we engage in what he calls flow activities, such as sports, rituals, art, and I would say gaming as well. These activities are designed to make flow experiences easier to achieve, according to Mihai, as they facilitate the conditions that trigger the flow state. Flow activities have rules and clear goals to attain, and they provide immediate feedback. We have a sense of control over these activities and can track our progress. But all flow activities have one thing in common. A transformation of the self takes place by making it more complex. With complex, Mihai means the development of skills, experiences and knowledge. For example, mastering rock climbing or painting. Flow happens when such transformation takes place. Mihai distinguishes two non-optimal states in this diagram: anxiety and boredom. Anxiety occurs when one's skill level is too low for the activity in question. Boredom occurs when the activity is too easy for one's skill level. Hence, there's hardly any fun in playing Age of Empires 4 against a complete noob as a gold rank player, which is an average skill level. So the match will likely be a boring one. No transformation takes place, as there's no challenge and no opportunity for growth. But playing against a level 2 conqueror isn't fun either, because there's such a discrepancy in regards to skill level that the average player doesn't stand a chance. When the activity means just being repeatedly obliterated by a vastly superior opponent, a flow state won't likely occur. Therefore, playing against players of around the same skill level, preferably slightly above, is optimal. However, when one's skill increases, it's important to keep playing with matching opponents to prevent boredom. So there should be a balance between challenge and skill level. A caveat is that the experience of challenges, competition and progress is subjective. Some people need more challenge than others, and different people experience the flow state in different activities. My sister, for example, finds her flow state during rock climbing, but not in writing essays, which is where I experience it. So, for a significant part, where one's flow state lies is personal. After all, the flow state doesn't seem so mysterious. It's actually quite logical. It's a consequence of certain conditions, as a dish is the consequence of a recipe. The flow state while driving was a fortunate coincidence of external and internal ingredients. Now, the question remains, what can we consciously do to achieve the flow state? When the poet becomes the poem, the driver the drive, and the painter the painting, that's the flow state. It's when trying has ceased and the conscious desire for optimal performance or outcome has waned. It's when the mind has stopped telling you what if, why, when, and even how. It's when, as Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi stated, perception and understanding have come to a stop and spirit moves where it wants. It happens when you stop trying, and when you stop trying, it happens. Crave for it painfully and it will elude you. Forget it and enjoy what you're doing and it appears. There's no direct way of catching it, but when the conditions are there, it may actually come. So how can we create these conditions? Here are some practical tips derived from Mihai's work. Do something you enjoy. Find your challenge skill balance. Set clear goals. Make sure you get immediate feedback. Focus on the task at hand and thus let go of planning, worrying or ruminating about the past. Go all the way into whatever you're doing. When it comes to the focused part, there are several things we can do to enhance that, such as mindfulness and meditation. Rituals and warm-up routines can help too. They make the mind ready to engage in the task, which becomes more effective when they become habitual and when they include an activity that reduces discursive thinking. Near the end of his book, Mihai says that the forms of psychic entropy that currently invade the mind and causes so much anguish are likely to have been recent invaders of the mind. They are products of a vastly increased complexity in society, culture, and our minds. In simpler times, humans were closer to animals in terms of flow. There was the occasional psychic entropy in times of danger, hunger, or pain. But overall, we were free from the worries brought about by the complex societies of today. Is there a way back to such a simple mode of existing? It would be very difficult and almost impossible to operate in today's world. Thus, the challenge we face is to return to what is, in essence, a more primordial, harmonious mind state in the face of our highly complex modern environment. Solitude, therefore, can help achieve flow, according to Mihai. I mean, let's face it, solitude allows us to turn away from the world, at least for a while, especially if we disconnect from certain media outlets. The constant flow of information, the noise of catastrophizing media, the warped showcasing of people's lives, and the consumeristic ideals of what you should own and do with your time are significant birthplaces of distraction. Hence, for some activities and some individuals, solitude is essential. So, what do you think? What triggers the flow state within you? And what prevents you from having it? Please let us know in the comments. This often leads to interesting discussions. If you're interested in a more philosophical view on the flow state, I recommend that you watch my older video, The Philosophy of Flow, which...
Now we got some different aspects of the mind.
For most of us...
Review today that'll give us just basically a basic understanding on what we're working with when it comes to the mind. Now, you can talk about not being depressed, being anxious. You can even talk about being scared or nervous. But all of these are things that happen inside of you. They don't happen so everybody can see it. Ain't no big sign that start floating on your body that say, oh, I'm mad right now. So these are all processes that we got to exercise on how to use properly, or at least in some way that serves us. Not necessarily in a way that is the best for everybody, but just a way that serves us. We're going to get some more things looked at in a second. Just let me score some more points. All right. Nah, I don't want to see this. Ted, get out of here. Let's increase it.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Top Think. Today we're going to learn about 4 powerful techniques to increase your IQ. Now, let's begin. Have you ever felt like the dullest person in the room? Yeah. Has a low test score made you doubt your intelligence? Many people think their IQ is set in stone. They assume that one bad grade is a recipe for lifelong stupidity. But your intelligence isn't predetermined. The portions of your brain responsible for learning, memory, and other forms of cognition can change over time. As you mature, these regions develop at different rates. Some people will nurture them, helping these regions grow dense and complex. Other people will neglect them, leaving their brains immature and slow. My point here is, your intelligence depends on you. While nature certainly plays a role, very few people are doomed from the get-go. But that doesn't mean increasing your IQ is quick and easy. No, while some shortcuts can earn you a few extra points, developing lasting intelligence takes time and a lot of hard work. These 4 techniques each offer you a powerful way to develop your brain and boost your intelligence. Oh, and the very best part is, every single one of these techniques is right at your fingertips. So if you want to increase your IQ, incorporate these 4 powerful techniques into your daily routine. Yeah, it may take a bit of hard work, but the reward is a gift that lasts a lifetime. Number 1, independent study. While advanced degrees offer an array of educational opportunities, you can increase your IQ without spending thousands on an expensive program. In this day and age, information's everywhere. If you don't believe me, open a web browser, type in any question you can imagine. Someone, somewhere in the world, will have an answer. You'll find research studies conducted on the subject, books written by leading experts in the field, classes taught by experienced professionals. The modern world offers a limitless supply of educational resources. All you have to do is use them. Many of the world's most intelligent people found success outside of traditional academia. They checked out dozens, if not hundreds, of books from the library. They attended conferences, listened to seminars, and networked with others in their field. They took advantage of online courses where they not only learned from the best, but also honed new and unique skills. The information's out there. The resources are waiting to be read, absorbed, and put into practice. There's only one hurdle standing in your way. It's the same reason that most people struggle to educate themselves without traditional schooling. When you study on your own, there's no one telling you what to do. There's no one keeping you in line. There's no one forcing you to read book after book. Outside of the classroom, learning is a game against yourself. If you want to increase your IQ, you're responsible for your own education. If you falter, you won't learn much, but if you can stay self-disciplined, you'll discover an incredible habit which you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. Why is that? Well, because independent study teaches you to love learning. You begin to crave new knowledge and synthesize that knowledge in ways that most people just don't understand. Have you ever noticed the most intelligent people aren't just good at one thing? Their encyclopedic brains excel in specific fields, but they draw from a wide bank of information. When you understand a myriad of subjects, your brain processes information in more innovative ways. You discover new solutions, connections, and perspectives which you never would have seen otherwise. So if you're interested in something, anything, just pick up a book, read an article, enroll in an online course. Each and every time you discover something new, your cognitive abilities will grow a little bit more. You don't need teachers, lectures, and classrooms to build your intelligence. With millions of educational resources at your disposal, you can increase your IQ all on your own. Number 2, musical training. Did you learn piano as a kid? Most people played some kind of instrument growing up. Maybe you played in the school band or just learned a couple of songs on the guitar. These days, you may only remember a few chords, but that childhood hobby had a lasting impact on your brain. A study from 1998 in the journal Scientific Correspondence discovered something incredible about musical training. It turns out adults who play an instrument were better learners than almost anyone else. Imagine you're sitting in class listening to a lecture on American history or cell biology. Some students will retain more information than others. Their memories are geared towards certain kinds of stimuli, either verbal or visual. If you have a strong verbal memory, you learn the best from lectures, speeches, and conversations. You retain and process spoken language quickly and efficiently, but if you're a visual learner, lectures aren't your strong suit. Instead, you prefer diagrams and displays which show information in a visual way. So how do these two types of learning relate to music, you may ask? After reading and memorizing music, adults with musical training demonstrated fantastic verbal memories. In fact, their verbal skills significantly outperformed everyone else in the study. But they're not bad visual learners either. Their visual scores remained on par with the average visual learning. In other words, musicians have a knack for both types of learning. So what do these results mean for you? If you learn an instrument, you may become a capable learner across the board, absorbing both verbal and visual stimuli. If you can learn in more diverse ways, your brain can process more information than the average person and understand subjects from a variety of angles. Oh, but that's not all musical training does for your brain. A second study from 2009 in the Journal of Neuroscience found that music actually reconstructs the brain. Scientists call this brain plasticity. Brain plasticity means the structure of your brain can change in response to your environment. If your environment is more musical, those changes become more dramatic. Your brain is the most susceptible to change during major periods of development like adolescence and young adulthood. During these periods of significant growth, musical training strengthens the regions of your brain associated with learning, memory, motor skills, and auditory skills. Not to mention, it's also emotionally and creatively stimulating. So pick up the piano, fish your old guitar out of the garage, learn a song or two, or just fiddle with the strings. You don't have to be a world-class musician. A little practice goes a long way. Number 3, strengthening your heart. Physical and intellectual performance go hand in hand. A study from 2009, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of the Sciences of the United States of America, discovered a close relationship between intelligence and athleticism. We often think of brains and brawn as natural enemies, but physical fitness is a great way to increase your IQ, but not in the way most people think. Lifting weights and building muscles isn't going to strengthen your brain, but conditioning your heart might. In this 2009 study, participants with strong cardiovascular systems were some of the most intelligent. Well, why? Because the heart supplies the brain with oxygenated blood. Your brain needs that blood to think, process, and retain information. Oh, and that's not all. The heart also communicates with the brain in several different ways. Neurologically, the two organs transmit nerve impulses back and forth, controlling integral bodily functions. Your heartbeat, for example, stems from signals in the brain. The heart and brain also exchange information through hormones, pressure waves, and neurotransmitters. So even if your heart can't think, it plays an important role in all kinds of cognitive and psychological functions. So physical fitness isn't just for athletes. Intelligent people need to challenge their bodies too. And that way your brain gets everything it needs to perform at its peak.
Students with ADHD save 10 hours studying with this Chrome extension. But no,
Number 4, mastering a new language. In our society, language is everything. We use language to express ideas, concepts, and philosophies. We use it to tell stories and document our history, to communicate and build relationships. Without language, humankind would never have evolved into the global force that we are today. That's why understanding language is such a key component of our intellectual abilities. People who understand language excel socially and professionally in our society. So what's the best way to improve your understanding of language? Learning a new language is a great place to start. In a 2012 study from the journal Neuroimage, researchers found that bilingual adults have a huge neurological advantage over adults who speak only one language. You see, learning a new language is a lot like musical training. It challenges specific regions of the brain on a regular basis, forcing those regions to expand. The two most important regions are the hippocampus, which controls learning and memory, and the frontal lobe, which moderates problem solving and language comprehension. Adopting a new language leads to a higher concentration of gray matter in both the hippocampus and the frontal lobe. More gray matter allows for more complex cognitive development, and more development means a higher IQ. Oh, and the best part of this powerful technique, like all the others on this list, is that you can start at any time. There are dozens of classes, tutors, and books that can teach you a second language in no time. You can even use interactive apps on your phone which turn language comprehension into an educational game. By taking advantage of these resources, you won't just learn a few new tricks, you'll expand your brain and you'll increase your IQ for years to come. Hey, thank you for watching Top Think, and be sure to subscribe because more incredible content is on the way.
All right, y'all. We're going to go ahead and get up out of here for today. But I want to go ahead and put this stamp on this episode. All right. So, as far as your mental health goes, as far as your mental health goes, a certain amount of study is needed. Just like you would go and you would work out your body, and you would figure out which workouts are helping you the most and, you know, are the best for you. You got to go into your mind and figure out which thoughts are the best for you, which actions are the best for you, which practices and behaviors and routines are the best for you. Because once you do that, that gives you the tools and the resources to be able to pull out when you need them, or that understanding when you need it of yourself. So if we didn't look at some of these traps or some of these things that we all fall into, we wouldn't even know. We'd be sitting here talking in circles. So we're gonna do more of this throughout the week. As always, you can catch us here tomorrow, Financial Fridays on Expansion Pack. I'm your host, Dan F. Man. It's a simple show, but we get a lot done and a lot talked about here. So it's a great week. This has been a great week. I appreciate y'all for tuning in, and I'm gonna get on up out of here. I ain't gonna hold on too much longer. I can't play with Eli again tonight. I gotta play with a different person tonight. I gotta play with Dan. So Eli will be back for you. In the meantime, I'm gonna holler at y'all tomorrow on Expansion Pack. This is DGTA TV. Chill. And we out.